So we've gone over that, let's say we're going to get up to that 8%, maybe 9% range. But when you get a little bit higher than that, like this fantastic old ale, I've got a bottle to represent somewhere.
From Mikkeller in San Diego, the Mikkeller AleSmith.
That starts to get into a little bit more smithing of your techniques.
Exactly, which is why it comes from AleSmith.
What?
So yeah, this takes a lot more attention, this takes a lot more focus, and it does take a little bit more planning than just going up to your classic 8% beers.
Right, and sometimes we actually do recommend having specialized equipment when it gets into this style range. One of the easiest and most important things that I think you can do for any beer that you have, but also especially when you get up in this 9+% alcohol range, is actually having pure O2, actual oxygen that you're adding into your beer.
Yeah, atmosphere is not going to cut it at this point. You don't have enough oxygen saturation for the high amount of oxygen that is needed in there. And I imagine there's somebody out there going, well, what about oxidation, malt oxidation on there? In all honesty, in some beers, like this fantastic example of an old ale, some of that oxidation is actually a plus in the flavor compounds. You get that dry, sherry-like quality going on in these high ABV beers, which is really delicious and tastes different than it does in the low ABV beers.
But even still, a lot of this will go away during the primary stage of fermentation because the yeast will actually use up that oxygen to multiply themselves and make sure that there's plenty of yeasty beasties going at your sugars and making sure this alcohol can get up there. That said, anytime you're oak aging, you can expect oxygen anyway, and so you're going to be getting some of these flavors regardless.
Another thing you have to do in there is a big yeast pitch.
Yeah.
We've been talking about yeast health this whole time, and again, we're going to talk about it more and more because yeast health is what this is all about. But make sure that you have enough yeast to rip through all of these sugars. There's a lot going on in these beers. There's a lot of sugars to eat. There's a lot to get through, so you need more than your average yeast pitch.
Yeah, besides from that, the yeast in this range are actually creating an environment that's relatively toxic for them. And so you kind of want to hedge your bets by making sure you have more because some of them are going to die off by the time they get to the end, the end game. So doing a big old starter, which the best way to do that is to have a stir plate and an Erlenmeyer flask, a borosilicate flask. That said, you can do a starter in the bottom of a previous fermenter, or you can just plan on a smaller beer going to be the beer that gets pitched into this beer, basically.
Yes, you never want to have your yeast end prematurely, finish prematurely. That is not a good thing. You're going to end up with a beer that's way too sweet, way too full in the mouth, and you don't want that. You want it to finish out nice. So having big enough yeast pitch to finish all the way till the end is definitely a good thing.
Lastly, in this range, that's the first time that nutrient is not only, nutrient's always important, it's always a good idea, but in this range is actually really vital. And we recommend not only doing a nutrient pitch at the very beginning of the overall fermentation, but also progressing your nutrient or successively adding it during fermentation.
Yeah, the most common place you're going to add it in is after a third of sugar depletion. You're going to have a lot of massive yeasties in there. You're going to have some really good fermentation going on. And this is the point where it can start to slow down. And this is a great point to add that second dose of yeast nutrients to make sure that the yeast is healthy enough to survive all the way to the end.
Make sure they survive. Kind of fun fact about how yeast are going to work in your beer, in any style beers, they're going to, generally speaking, attack the simpler sugars first, which is why they start to slow down getting into this, 2/3 or third sugar depletion. Basically, the simpler parts of the sugar that are really easy for the yeast to eat are gone, and so the yeast are now having to attack longer carbon chains that isn't as easy to munch on.
Kind of what we do. You set down your meal in front of you. You're going to go after those nice, easy things to get to first, and then kind of move on to your tougher items that may be more delicious, but they don't go down as easy. And that's what yeast do. They get the easy stuff first, and then they go on to the more complex.
Yeah.
So make sure you have enough nutrients. There's also, when you start getting into that kind of 2/3 sugar depletion, 1/3 to 2/3, adding the yeast nutrients in and hitting it with a little bit of oxygen. Hitting it with oxygen provides more oxygen for the yeast to keep working on these complex, but also can stir it up and make sure that the yeast goes back into fluctuation.
Absolutely.
More tricks to help you do this. Temperature schedules. Temperature schedules is really going to help out to have a smooth fermentation with no sticks.
So basically the goal of temperature fermentation is making sure, first and foremost, that everything doesn't rip through too hot and you get a ton of boozy, fusily alcohol flavors like you're drinking the vodka that you bought when you were in high school.
No. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Also, to create a nice smooth fermentation, that way your yeast doesn't spike, temperature spike, or run itself out too early, again, without finishing the job.
Yeah.
You want your yeast to go all the way to completion.
So to do all this, some level of temperature control is obviously super important for two reasons. First and foremost, because at the very beginning, when a lot of those sugars are being fermented, fermentation is exothermic, meaning your beer is producing heat.
And that heat will definitely produce some off flavors. You don't want those fusel alcohols. You don't want those bad phenols or esters that some of these yeasts can produce at high temperatures.
So start out in that nice mid-range in your yeast profile. Whatever it says, try to stick to the middle for the first part of fermentation. That said, you don't want your yeast to fall asleep, which means you do have to do something towards the end of fermentation to prevent that, like actually warm your beer back up if your room temperature isn't warm enough.
So when yeast is warmer, it is more active and it will finish out. It will ferment those last few points to get that nice, delicious beer.
Energy and temperature, you know, they're a thing. They work together.
They do.
That said, there's one more thing that we do on this medium range that we actually do in a lot of other beers just to make sure that our yeast don't fall asleep, and that's just blow some CO2 up through the bottom of our conicals. You can simulate this by, if you're in a carboy in a closed situation, giving it a little bit of a stir, a jostle, if you will, and that should help your yeast from falling asleep if you have a more highly flocculent yeast like the Fuller strain or something like that. But when you get into extreme fermentation, the 12+%, the big stuff, you got to kind of take those things one step further.
Double your yeast pitch and also use multiple strains. You don't have to stick with one strain. Like Peter said earlier, if you like the Fuller strain or an ESB strain,
it's a delicious strain.
Amazing. It is notorious for falling asleep before it's done, especially in high grav beers.
Yeah.
But you're only left with a little bit of sugar in there. So you can use a different yeast strain with an entirely different flavor profile to either add a little bit extra to it or even just finish it out.
Start out with your flavor strain and then finish with something super aggro so it can get the job dids, you know? Going into overall yeast health and multiple pitches, you're going to be actually wanting those yeasts to stay in suspension longer, even if it is a more highly flocculent strain. So doing things like what we said before, blowing CO2 up through the bottom of the conical to make sure your yeast is active is one thing that you can do. But on the commercial scale, what big breweries will do is they'll actually have a pump constantly cycling all their yeast throughout their beer during the entirety of fermentation.
If you're on a smaller scale, you have some conical fermenters, it's beautiful. Take your CO2, hook it straight to the bottom, turn it up high, and just blow it right up through the bottom. On the bigger scale, or if you can get your hands on a diaphragm pump, which we recommend diaphragm pumps over impeller pumps, just because you have less working parts on the inside, less for it to have an infection or go wrong.
Yeah, or pick up oxygen or, you know, whatever.
Be bad. Have a diaphragm pump and you can recirculate it around. But if you are doing that recirculation, do keep in mind you don't want a splashing action on the inside.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you're drawing and putting the beer back in under the water level.
A lot of small parts in that probably isn't the best idea either, so if you're going like, you know, out of your conical and into a small barb, into a tube, into your diaphragm pump, into another barb, into a ball valve, and then back into somewhere else, that's a lot of small parts you're working with. The bigger and more open the distance that the yeast can travel, the better it's going to be because it's not going to be, you know, getting your stuff clogged up and, you know, running into some other issues. So another thing you want to focus on when it comes to big high gravity beers is during fermentation, your beer is going to drop in pH. It's going to create acid and alcohol during fermentation. So you want to take care of on the front end, doing some care and conditioning to your worts to make sure that it's not already starting at too low of a pH.
pH buffering is what we're talking about here. Because you're creating more alcohol, the yeast is going to be fermenting for a longer time. This is something that's more important than it would be in your smaller batches. While it's important all over, you really have to watch that pH to make sure it stays in that nice, healthy range.
The other thing that you might not necessarily think about that's really important is osmotic pressure. And so a lot of people, when they think, I need to do a really big high alcohol beer, they think they want to start at something like 1.14 or, you know, ridiculous amounts like that and ferment it all the way down. It doesn't actually work that way because the initial osmotic pressure, meaning the amount of stuff outside of your yeast cells versus the amount of stuff inside of your yeast cells, is so great that your yeast at that point will Well, shrivel up.
Think of it as almost being an atmospheric pressure. If you take a styrofoam head, put it at the bottom of the ocean, we've seen this experiment, it shrinks up. The same thing happens to the yeast under osmotic pressure. If there's too much on the outside of the yeast cell, then that yeast cell will shrivel up. It will actually go down, and it won't allow those sugars to pass through the semi-permeable membrane to be fermented.
So what we recommend is usually starting at somewhere around 1.1 for these super duper high alcohol beers, and then actually adding sugar additions throughout fermentation. You add multiple sugar additions, multiple nutrient additions, and obviously during this entire time making sure your yeast is in suspension and lively and active and taking care of all these steps.
Which brings us to another point of staged sugar additions. To have a better, cleaner, more healthy fermentation, not doing your beer all in one go, but starting the fermentation with a part of your beer and then successively adding sugar additions to it to keep it nice and healthy fermentation going on, as well as bumping the ABV up without killing your yeast.
Now, everything that we're talking about here definitely gets into a more a more technical realm of brewing, which means there's going to be a lot of trial and error in you doing this. So we don't want to throw at this out there saying if you do all these things, you will for sure hit a banger on your very first time making all these beers. Based on your system and what you're able to accomplish, there will be some trial and error. More often than not, it'll still taste pretty good because high alcohol beers are pretty tough against the outside environment, meaning they're more often than not going to be good, but not necessarily going to finish out or be what you want them to be, if that makes sense.
This is a big trial to it. Even the big boys like Avery will come out and say, this is a proprietary method that we have developed for our brew house, and they don't all end up the same.
Yeah.
If you've been drinking a 120-minute IPA and you've noticed that varies between 16 and 20%, this is what we're talking about right there. Doing these big beers is hard. It does not always come out the same. And unless you do a practice of blending, they're not going to come out the same every single time. But that's also what makes it fun and delicious.
Exactly. You get a unique experience every single time, and you get to kind of throw caution to the wind and, do something absolutely abstract and weird. Speaking of blending, big boys like this actually in their barrel programs almost always do blending to create such phenomenally complex and ready to serve high alcohol beers.
And the bigger guys, there's a reason that they do this. I say bigger. Avery is a big brewery in the craft beer industry, which is just fine. They're awesome. But to create a beer that is consistent to an alcohol level and flavor, they have to do the practice of blending to numbers or flavors rather than just letting the barrel ride out and be what it is.
It's the same as pretty much any big distillery or winery that you see. They can make great stuff off their first batch. It's going to taste pretty good off the barrel, but if they want that perfect blend of flavors and everything else that's going on in there, they've got to pull from multiple sources and they got to make a blended product.
Another way to get your sugars out of here is amylase additions. Getting more starches converted into sugars during the mash and fermentation.
If you think of your attenuation as normally 75, maybe 80%, the bigger your beer, the higher your final gravity is going to be. Well, when you get into ridiculous, ultimately super, super huge high alcohol beers, you don't want a 1040 or 1050 finishing gravity to match that. You want something that's going to be relatively dry. And then in doing so, you're also creating more alcohol, so you're making a bigger beer. That's why amylase is so important, because you need to take down some of those bigger sugars and turn them into something that your yeast can actually attack. So we recommend doing amylase during fermentation, during one of your later sugar additions, to make sure that you're still breaking down those compounds and making sure you can get that high alcohol beer that's the right level of finishing gravity, like let's say 1020 instead of 1050.
Yes, and don't be worried about your beer going too dry at this point. If you're making a beer above 12%, there are going to be so much residual sugars and flavors left over that you don't have to worry about going dry like you would if you're putting amylase into, say,
a 1050 or 1060 beer.
Yes.
And if your yeast can get that thing bone dry, kudos to your yeast. It's a badass bastard. Let's give a quick wrap up of what we mean when we say doing a big high alcohol beer. So if you're aiming for that 13, 14, 15%, the things you need to hit on again, gigantic yeast pitch, pure oxygen, making sure your pH starts out a little bit higher than normal, making sure your osmotic pressure isn't ridiculously high too fast, meaning don't start above 1.1, add sugar during fermentation. Make sure you're aerating multiple times. I would say over the first 3 days, you can probably add oxygen every single one of those 3 days. Recirculate your yeast in whatever way you can, sloshing your carboy around, pumping CO2 up through your conical, or hooking up a pump that recirculates it the entire time, and staged sugar and nutrient additions. That's everything you need to try to attempt to tackle these ultra high alcohol beers.
Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid of a beer that turns out different than what you expected. As we've been saying, these beers are monsters. They almost never end up what you think they were going to do. And again, that's the fun of it. That's what makes this pretty darn awesome.
And don't be afraid to send us a bottle when you make something amazing. On that note, thank you all for watching. Hopefully you learned something. Please tune in to our live streams weekly on Sunday and then also other times during the week, so turn on notification bells because we don't always know when we're doing them.
Yay!
Blow, beep.